Mark Atkinson. I'm the project manager of the Elms Farm project. And it's the excavation of what I feel is a very important Iron Age and Roman settlement. We're actually standing on the site of the what we believe is the temple, and at the centre of the town. We have excavated this area quite well, but there's vast swathes of land surrounding this site, this actual site of the temple, which we're going to leave largely unexcavated. And who knows whether we've got more substantial remains such as this in them. We really just do not know what's in this area. Well, we're actually standing here on our last day, on our final morning's work. And you can see the machines rumbling behind me. We don't know whether we're going to get back here. We've had the undertaking from Bovis that they will allow us further time, but as yet there is no resources, no money to allow us to carry on excavating here. So we just don't know whether we'll ever get back here or not. It's quite possible that we won't. And we know that we've only dug perhaps as little as 20% of the site. There's a vast amount more, and 20%. That's only 20% of a 52-acre site. So that is quite a small area, really. Right. The site has Iron Age origins, and very important Iron Age origins, in that it seems to be trading with the continent even as early as, say, 100 BC, perhaps earlier. Now, this is before the Romans ever came to Britain, and there they are dealing with Europe. And so from that point of view, it's a very important site as far as Britain and as far as probably as Western Europe is concerned, in that the site was trading with Italy and Spain and France even then. It seems that I think that is the most important aspect of this site. The Roman occupation which followed is essentially the Romans coming into a very prosperous town for that period, anyway, relatively prosperous, and taking it over. And it's that transition that is of so much interest, I believe, both to academics and to general public. This is where the native Britain becomes civilized Romano Britain. To date, we've actually excavated from our 20% sample something in the region of 250,000 fragments of pottery. Now, say we've only excavated as little as a fifth of the site, times that by 5, and you're dealing with 1.25 million sherds, which is a vast amount that you can really do an awful lot with, both in... Okay, well, we're actually standing on a Roman road here, and you can see that the gravel here is far more compacted than elsewhere on site. It actually swings around. Difficult to follow because there's an awful lot of gravel on the site, different types of gravel. The road is swinging around that way, and we're standing on quite a major junction. Now the road branches off, and it's between this road that we have our Iron Age and Roman temples, one on top of another one. And it seems to be that the temple, even in the Iron Age, was very important to the town, and therefore the Romans took it on and built their own temple on the site as well, perpetuating that very important religious role to the site. Elsewhere, you can see already that the water from the high water table of the ground here, and the weeds are quickly taking over the site. We have excavated a number of very well preserved wells, complete with their oak linings, over in these areas, and that is because the water table is so high that we're getting such a good preservation of the whole road for the construction firm is coming through. They've already covered over in the foreground. You can see a beautiful compacted gravel surface. We believe is very early Roman, perhaps late Iron Age, and we have evidence for buildings having taken off. It probably hasn't done too much damage at this stage. Although in the long term you're obviously going to get compaction problems. It's only been down there for something like 6 weeks, therefore it certainly could be taken off. As you can see, it was just slapped down on top of a part of the site that we've by no means finished. Well, I'm walking up the main road, one of the main roads in the town, and just jumping over what would have been a big fence line delineating the temple complex from the roadside. We come inside the complex here, and we've got remains of a small building at the apex of these two roads swinging around the outside of our temple area, and we think this may possibly have had a role to play in lead working on site. We've had quite a lot of lead smelting waste from a small pit in the middle of this feature. You can see the great depth of archaeology. It's quite unusual out in the countryside as we are to find a site with up to a metre of stratigraphy of archaeological layers piled up over something like 500 years. We've got 500 years of history, all concentrated in this area, over such a large area as well. And that is one of the great important aspects of this site. It's far exceeded my expectations. I think everybody's, which is perhaps partly why we're finding ourselves underfunded now. Something like 450 houses and a bypass. In a year we certainly won't have excavated everything. We will have merely increased our sample. This area. Well, this is the area just directly behind our temple. Our temple is that slightly higher patch of gravel over there. And we've been digging these large pits in the hope that they would have some religious significance, in that you do get votive pits in which offerings are thrown into. Now, sadly, these don't seem to have turned out to be such votive pits, but this is exactly the kind of processes we need to go through. We need to excavate to find out just what things are. Without doing that, then we have no idea of what these brown splodges on the surface are. People along this stretch of the site are excavating a series of buildings which we think are associated with our temple. We've got at least 3 phases of building on top of each other. Now the problem with this site is that there was no local building material, and everything was built out of wooden walls, maybe with clay plastering, and thatched roofs largely as well. And so it is quite a difficult, lengthy process, but a very rewarding one given the time. You can see just in front of us what we're looking for, these dark beam slots cut into the gravel, and that is where the wooden foundations to the houses or the buildings here were. And so we need to locate those, excavate them in order to reconstruct the buildings, to find out how many buildings, of what date and what style we're standing on the site here. Certainly since the 5th century, so say 1500 years, there has been no significant disturbance to the site. I don't know of one, certainly not one that has been excavated. It's difficult to tell if it's unique. The thing about these undisturbed sites is that there's no indication of what is underneath them, because the content of that site haven't been raked up, say, by the plough. So it's difficult to tell. Probably all our best sites are ones that, or our best preserved sites are unknown, simply because they are preserved very well. Therefore we know very little about them. On the peripheries of Heybridge and Malden. In its Roman phase, it was circular, something like 15 metres across, and probably was just a high enclosure wall without a roof surrounding what we think here is an altar base or a statue base or a actual structure. Well, it hasn't really come from anywhere. This is a sort of a concreted plinth, and this is where I think our shrine sat at the back end of our temple. And as you can see, it's merely large, rounded, river-worn flints in a mortar matrix, just to bond it together. Now this would seem to be quite a substantial thing, and therefore load-bearing. So we can surmise that we had either a very heavy structure or perhaps even a very heavy statue here. But it's quite possibly one of the richest in terms of archaeological material. We're leaving the temple behind us, but we're still in our temple complex. And if you come up here, we've been looking in this area because we've got what for this site is a substantial structure. As you can see, here is the foot of what may well have been quite a substantial wall. If you just pan around behind you and look in this hole, this is the footing for that wall, which is quite substantial. So we could have had quite a high wall. Sadly, on this side, it's been robbed out. But I'm actually standing at the entrance to this whole religious temple complex, and so there's a whole channeling of the focus of the settlement through this line towards our temple, and you can see here that we're only managing to dig a very small area of it, and quite very.
Richard Webster, I've been on the site now for 5 months. I'm a site assistant. And it's a wonderful place, and it should be saved because it's part of our nation's heritage place. It should be taken out properly. I mean, we have been being quite brutal, but that's the nature of the job these days. This is an Iron Age sort of ground surface, and we'd like to actually get into it and excavate it because it's going to have lots of dating evidence. So we can sort of date the surface which is lying on top of it, which in turn will help us with the wall. But unfortunately, being the last day, we can't. We've got to get these records in shape in order so that people after us can actually put it all together and make some sense of it. Not much just putting holes all over the place. Not boring. It's there's always a low level of background interest, and then something exciting will come along. And it is exciting working out the relationship between all the soils and the surfaces, and reconstructing in your own mind and on your records a picture of the site and how it functions and how it may have existed. So it is very interesting. It's just done over a long period of time. Well, you can't really grade sites because everyone's different. I mean, some sites the social life's better, some sites the organisation is better, some sites the digging's better, the preservation's better, but everyone is unique. You can't really say it's the best. It's been a very interesting one. I came here because they give me a job, and it's more experience, I've not really got that much experience in Roman or Iron Age, and I'd like to know a bit more. And jobbing digger, I'd like to work. That's why I'm here.
Certainly been thrown in the deep end with the Roman and Iron Age around here. Yes, as you can see, the depth of the archaeology for a rural context is quite exceptional. It's a shame that we're not going to get all the way through even in this small patch, because we need entire sequences excavated really to make any real sense. You need a starting point and a finishing point, and here they're going to walk away and leave it. Although it doesn't have the roads and the more impressive sort of temple-like structures that we've got over there, we seem to be in the domestic area of the town, and that, of course, taking the town as a whole, is just as important. In that we need to find out where the local population are living and what they're actually doing in those areas. And this is what we have here. Now they seem to be digging in an awful lot of pits, but there are domestic dwellings in amongst all of this. Again, it's a question of beam slots and post holes and evidence for wooden buildings like that. But we also have pottery kilns. We have metal working in the form of hearths, and that's what I'm going to show you now. I'm going to show you one of the hearths that we've been excavating. Such a huge amount of both sort of light industrial and domestic activity, which is what you would find in a Roman town of this nature. This is one of the more substantial features on our site, and the thing is that we only get substantial constructions like this where fire is being made. With wooden buildings, obviously, you need something fireproof to have your fire in. And if you walk around this way, Trevor here is the supervisor for this area, so he can probably tell you all about it.
Would you like to tell us a bit about it, Trevor?
Well, it's probably a corn drying oven is what we think, really. We're not entirely sure, but there are things that look similar that are put down as corn drying ovens. And basically, this area down here seems to be where they would have had the fire. And then there was another layer of sort of large tiles across the top, and that would have been where they would have put the corn, and it would have had sort of structure over it. And it would have actually dried in there, and this would be the fire, and they would sort of stoked it from this end, probably.
Likely to have been a bit larger, I think.
Yeah, probably.
I think some of it's been removed by later pitting.
Yeah, possibly some of this end might have gone. Though at the moment it is looking as if there is actually sort of a cut for the construction here.
It could have been quite small. The reason why I thought it might have been bashed out by a pit is that we do have a pit right next to it with suspiciously sort of similar material in it. And I was just wondering whether it was derived from this structure. And this is the kind of thought process obviously we go through as we excavate. We had no idea that any of this was here until we dug into what we felt was a pit there.
Because there is quite a lot of tile that's missing from the top of this. This would have been sort of, sort of twice as high, if not more. But they're built very well. It's only sort of tiny little bits of mortar in between, and it's just reused bits of tile. But let's not draw the section, so I can draw a cross section through it, just to show how it was built. Because from the top you can't see that it's deeper in the middle than what it is on it, because it sort of comes along and then goes down and then goes back up again.
Obviously, to understand these things we need to dismantle them. But during the course of that, we're actually going to get in a specialist in archaeomagnetic dating, and what that is well, it's the principle that the north direction at the time would have been frozen into the burnt clay at the